Feeling sunshine in my mountains. Not for long, mountains trip is coming on. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the shop. This week we're working on the Sterling rear axle for our 1-ton swap YJ. The Dana 60 is mostly done. Nothing else I can do until it's under the Jeep. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears and start working on the rear axle. We need to get these brakes pulled off. And the first thing you notice there is, I think we're probably going to have to replace that brake rotor. So some of the little things before I really get into the nitty gritty of this Sterling axle. So I went ahead and I pulled the gear set out, because I pulled this speed sensor out and I actually welded in a piece of a ball joint because it was the right diameter to fill that hole. We're going to cut that off. We're going to cut these ears off and grind that all smooth. And then the bolt, the retaining bolt for that is what I'm going to use for my breather. So the current breather is down here on the tube, but my truss is going to cover that. So I went ahead and I beveled that edge with my my countersink. We're going to go ahead and weld that hole shut. All right, that ought to do that. So I'm working on a truss for the rear axle, and in typical my fashion, I want to complicate things and make something a little bit unique and something you haven't seen before. So I went ahead and I stepped 8 bends across here at about 4-degree bends. So now 4 times 7 is 28 minus some flex back. So I've gone ahead and made this next bend at 20 degrees. It'll all make sense once I show you on the axle. Lots of grinding to do on this 10.5. Let's get geared up and get to work. So now we're using what is known as CAD, of course, cardboard aided design, thanks to Miller Lite. We're building the inner pieces of my truss. So I'm using the cardboard because a couple reasons. One is it's super easy to work with, and two is I already own it. So kind of just following the shape of things, getting it as close as I can. When I come to an edge, I can actually use my hammer. And one is it just creates a dirt mark that I can follow with my scissors to identify an edge of what I need to work around. So we're getting there, just one piece at a time, and if I screw it up, it's easy to start over, or I can maybe even tape some new cardboard to it just to fine-tune some shapes. It's getting close. All right, so that's pretty close. I think we can go ahead and transfer this to steel. I'm sure when I get it in steel, there's going to be a whole bunch of grinding and fitting to get it exactly where I want it, but I think that's a pretty good starting point. So in a perfect world, which of course I don't have a perfect world, I would have a chunk of 1/4-inch steel plate that's tall enough and wide enough to follow this template without having to make a seam. But I have a whole bunch of this 1/4-inch by 3-inch bar stock that I already own. I don't have to buy it. So I'm going to use that, and I'm just going to have a couple seams, which I don't think is the end of the world. We're going to bevel them and make some nice welds there. So that said, get as far as I can on this bottom piece. I'm just tracing my template with a Sharpie onto the steel. All right, let's see how good I am at following this line. This is going to be tough. I'm not the best with this, and nothing is straight, so I can't really use straight edges. So we're just going to have to wing it. I didn't bore you with all of the grinding and shaping, but this was pretty close. My CAD design really got me in the ballpark. It took, I don't know, maybe a half an hour to get these pieces ground and fitted so they fit just right. I have a couple spots with some small gaps, but I am not worried at all about filling those. I have a nice consistent inset all the way around. So now I just need to take some time and get this thing burned into place and then start the other side. Okay, now that both sides of the trusses are fitted, they're fitting really nice. I'm super happy with it. Now it's just time to burn it all in. I'm going to weld everything to the truss first before I weld anything to the axle. I don't want to warp the axle. We're going to go really slow when we weld to the axle, but there's some things on the truss I want to get done. So we're going to go ahead and at least get most of the truss welding done until I run out of welding gas, that is, and then we'll move on to welding it to the axle a little bit later. We're out of gas. You know what? That's not too bad. Now that the truss is fully welded, I pulled it off of the axle, I ground these seams, I ground all the miscellaneous slag off. Now it's time to make some extra holes. We need some drain holes in the bottom. So I picked up a set of these plasma cutting stencils from 911 Motorsports. Not sure if they're the right offset for, they didn't have one that specifically called out for the Yes Welder Cut 55, so I just guessed and I got the 430 offset, which, whatever, I don't care if my holes are exact. I don't have any reason to make dimensional holes. I'm just trying to make clean, nice round holes. So I went ahead and I clamped one of these plates to my truss. We're going to go ahead and cut it out and see how well it works. A little toasty, but man, look how nice and smooth that went. Yep, that's hot. So the nice thing about these 911 Motorsports templates is they've got center marks. So I can line up my center marks with the flat edge of steel, as well as my mark for the center of my hole, and keep things pretty darn accurate. Okay, it's time to get the truss back on the axle, this time for good. So I want to make real good ensure my pinion angle is where I want it. So any of the instructions I've read or written, for that matter, say to put the pinion angle at 8 degrees up. I set my Klein digital angle finder to 0 on my table, got my pinion angle at exactly 8. So now we can set our truss on here and put that again back to 0. Alright, bring that level up there. am at 1 degree and can't go anymore. This piece of the housing right there. I suppose we might as well make it right. So that's where we have to grind. There it is, right at 0. That's tight, that's tight. That looks tight. All my gaps look really good. I lost a point there. Nope, wrong way. 0. Close enough. Let's burn this thing in. So it's extremely important when you're welding an axle truss onto an axle like this. As big and as strong as this axle is, we can still bend it. So I want to make sure I jump around, weld a little bit over here, weld a little bit over there, weld some on the other side, let it cool for a bit, come back and weld some more. We definitely don't want to take our time. We want to go nice and slow. Make sure we keep our axle good and straight. So, that said, let's get to burning. Alright, let's let this thing cool for a while again. We don't want to get too carried away. The last bit of welding we have to do on this axle is welding the housing to the tubes. Now, I know the truss is going to add a bunch of strength, but I'm going to do that anyway. So we're going to go ahead and lay some beads in here. And why this is last is because once we're done with this and have some good heat in here, I'm actually going to wrap this in a blanket just to try to keep the cracking to a minimum. That one isn't too terrible. Again, while we still have some heat in this thing, I'm going to get this wrapped up and get it to cool as slow as possible, so hopefully these last couple welds don't break on us. Alright guys, that's it for this video. We got the Sterling prepped, we got the truss on and fully welded. Next video we're going to be attacking the suspension mounts on the Sterling 10.5 and then on to gears. So make sure to stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of videos coming out as fast as I can get them done, because I'm working really hard to get this Jeep ready for the Great American Crawl. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.